we'll have our fearless leader, President Richards.
Thank you, Deputy Borough President, and good evening. And thank you, Queens, for coming together on this incredibly difficult day for our city. Thank you to Reverend Newton, Rabbi Mendelson, and Imam Safraz Backus for leading us in prayer. Regardless of what faith you subscribe to, I hope we all heed your words of healing and unity. Before I begin, I'd like to ask that we all observe a moment of silence in honor of detectives Jason Rivera and Wilbert Mora. Thank you. I've been to my fair share of funerals for police officers lost in the line of duty. They hurt, they're devastated. The pain on the faces of their fellow officers, folks who know them, folks who've loved them. Folks who know it could have easily been them in those caskets. The anguish in the eyes of family members experiencing a kind of grief few amongst us can even begin to fathom. Parents grieving a child, children grieving a parent, a spouse grieving the person they believe they will grow old with. There is truly no worse agony in this world. But these two funerals hit different. They struck a different chord even with me. Not only as an elected official, but also as a black man living in Southeast Queens. Jason Rivera and Wilbert Mora were young, bright men of color who dedicated their careers to a more inclusive, community-first style of policing. Mora was 27. Rivera was just 22. Two men who could have easily chosen to do something else with their lives. They could have played it safe. They were men who came of age in a post-Eric Garner, New York, in a post-Ferguson America, a period where policing became polarizing. They came up in a time where it can feel like you have to choose whether black lives or blue lives matter most. But Detectives Rivera and Mora didn't see things that way. They knew exactly what that choice was, a false one. In November 2020, Detective Mora wrote a letter while at the academy titled, "Why I Became a Police Officer." In that letter, he spoke of watching his brother be stopped and frisked. He spoke of how deeply that troubled him. But he also spoke of how much that inspired him to be the change he wanted to see. This was when I realized, I quote, that I wanted to be part of the men in blue, to better the relationship between the community and the police department. Think about the courage it took Detective Rivera to write those words. He could have turned his anger inward at himself or outward at the world, but he didn't. 14 months after he wrote that letter, he was doing exactly what he said he would do, working in a community of color to improve trust and save lives. And he was there alongside Detective Mora, who lived just a few blocks away in East Harlem, working to better the very community he proudly called home. That's what Detectives Rivera and Mora and Officer Summit Salon, a Queens resident, were doing on January 21st when they encountered a fatal hail of gunfire. And that's why the deaths of Rivera and Mora hurt so different. When we talk about community first policing, they are the officers we talk about. They are the officers every community wants walking their streets. Officers who look like them, talk like them, and experience what they experience. They're the officers I want my own son to look up to as he grows up in Southeast Queens. It's a damn shame they aren't alive today. We've been robbed of two of New York City's finest. But even in death, Detective Mora will continue to live on in the complete strangers he saved. Somewhere in this country, in this city, his heart still beats. It beats inside the chest of someone who would not have been alive today without that heart transplant. The gifts of Mora's liver, kidney, and pancreas means 4 other families are not mourning the loss of a loved one the way his family is. And I cannot think of anything more heroic than that. But let's remember that gun violence doesn't only end lives, it scars those who survive. Let's remember that Officer Sulla not only had to watch his 2 partners lose their lives, he had to take a life in the process. To Officer Sulla, your entire home borough is here to uplift you in prayer and give you the strength to carry on. You and your family will always have the support of your extended family right here in Queens County. To our NYPD officers here and those protecting our families right now in every corner of Queens, we simply say thank you. We stand with you. We honor you. We recognize that every single time you put on a uniform, there's a chance you might not make it back home. And that is something none of us here should ever take for granted. In your honor and memory of Detective Rivera and Mora, we must shut down the iron pipeline so that no more of our neighbors, law enforcement or not, stare down the barrel of an illegal gun. There are no gun manufacturers, as I like to remind folks, on 135th Street in Harlem, in Southeast Queens, Far Rockaway, Western Queens, or elsewhere in this city. But we're still losing neighbors, and we continue to lose police officers to this scourge of an acceptable rate of shootings. Just last night, another 22-year-old NYPD officer was shot right here in our borough on his way to work as 2 men tried to carjack him at gunpoint. By the grace of God, he'll survive, but this shooting underscores the dangers our officers face every day, whether on duty or off duty like this officer was. So we mourn today, and we will fight like heck tomorrow so that Detectives Mora and Rivera's funeral is the last of its kind we have to attend. To all those sworn to serve and keep us safe, thank you for what you do. Queens is forever grateful for your sacrifice. Thank you.